3 principles for making the best Hyprland setup. Now that is what I'm going to be teaching you in this video, okay? Now, I have the 3 principles laid out here, but before I show them to you, you first are probably asking why the hell you should listen to me in the first place. Well, I have been writing Hyprland for over 4 years now, right? That's right. It used to be 3 years before, but now it's 4, which has allowed me to make custom theme switches like this one. Okay, funnily enough, it just ends up breaking, but regardless, right? It's allowed me 4 years, right? 4 years of experience has allowed me to make custom theme switches like this one, where I can choose any theme that I want and then have the rest of my system adapt to that, right? So here is my terminal. I can open up niche, for example, and then I can change the theme to whatever theme that I want, and ta-da, every single browser theme, every single terminal theme, every single file manager theme, everything adapts, right? That's the beauty of being able to write Hyprland for an insanely long amount of time, which is 4 years. I have been living and breathing this stuff every single day for longer than I can possibly count, right? 10,000 hours. I have done my 10,000 hours, right? And that is what has allowed me to actually make setups like this one, okay? That. And then another reason is because I have made custom Hyprland desktops for many clients before. Now, there is a link in the description that you can click where you can basically go and check out the desktops that I'd made for different clients in the past. It's actually the first link in the description. And funnily enough, that link in the description is also the link that is going to take you to a page where I show you exactly how to make a setup like this one, right? So it's a program that I've compiled where I've taken over 3 years, actually 4 years now, of knowledge of writing Hyprland, okay, compiled it into a list of step-by-step instructions and basically paradigms and worldviews that allow you to think the same way that I do and basically be able to write setups like this without having to jump through 50, 200, 300 different loopholes, just like I had to in order to learn how to do this damn stuff. Now, I might not seem as fired up thinking about it, okay, as I usually am, but that's because I've been doing this for so long that sometimes what happens is the monotony kicks in, okay? Now, trust me, I've been doing this for so long that I basically live and breathe this every single day, okay? My sole job, my sole incentive, my sole purpose, okay, is to make writing Hyprland easy for you so that you don't have to go through the same struggles that younger me did, okay? That is the second reason. And the third reason is because I have taught hundreds of thousands of people how to write Hyprland through this very channel. That's right. So if you exit full screen, if you are watching in full screen, which you should be, okay, don't be a dummy. Don't click on other tabs and look at the recommended section on the right side. Don't do that. Don't be stupid, okay? Install Unhook, which is an extension that blocks all that stuff, okay? Don't be a retard. Do not be a retard, okay? And don't get offended by me using offensive language. But anyway, right? If you scroll down, you should see the subscriber count as approximately 5,000 subscribers, right? So 5,000 people have opted in to listen to what I have to say about writing Hyprland. Granted that I have 4 years of experience, right? And if you go to my channel page, of course, and then look at the number of views, it's extremely close to 700,000. So I have taught a lot of people how to write Hyprland. And that is why you should listen to me, okay? Great. Now that we have gotten that out of the way, let me show you what the rest of the principles are. And I will not do any YouTube retention strategy or tactic, okay? And then keep these principles hidden so that you'll have to watch the entirety of the video because frankly, I do not care. If you do not have the attention span and the mental capacity and capability, okay, to delay gratification so much as to understand exactly what I'm going to tell you, then you don't basically deserve to be on this channel and you should really leave because I do not want you as a viewer. Okay, great. Now that all the people who are not the actual viewers have left and only the true loyal fans remain, I commend you. I congratulate you all. If you are an actual fan and if you actually derive value from this content, then I am extremely happy with you and I wish you the best in your rising Hyprland journey. Okay, now here are the principles. Ta-da. So first off, we're going to analyze the best. Now, why is it so important that we analyze the best? To explain this idea, I'm going to take an example from a branch, okay, a branch of science, or rather its own science called systems theory. So systems theory is basically a discipline, okay? It's a discipline, like kind of like physics, chemistry, math, all of them are disciplines of science, right? All of them are individual disciplines. Now, systems theory is a discipline which studies systems. So whenever you think of a system, what do you think of? Well, you think of your computer, but then apart from that, we have a bunch of different systems, right? We have a lot of systems. So if I zoom in here, me show you the bunch of systems. So we have the nervous system. If we're using the body as an example, we have the nervous system. And then we have the respiratory system. And then we have a couple of other systems as well, but the systems that we all know of are most likely going to be the ones in the body, right? So a system has lots of different parts to it, right? This is actually what a system looks like. So let me actually draw it out for you. Let's get a pen. Ta-da. That is not. Okay, here. Now, what's going to happen is each system is going to have these parts. Every system works this way, okay? So here, we're going to draw a bunch of different shapes so that I can explain to you how exactly a system works. Now, if you don't like me drawing shapes, you can just forward a little bit to see when I've completed the diagram, okay? Here we have what's known as the sun or the environment, okay? Great. Now, for any system, we have inputs, which is going to be this first triangle, and then we have processes, which is going to be this parallelogram. It's supposed to be a parallelogram. And then we have outputs, and then we have feedback, feedback. Great. So this is how any system operates. And of course, all of these interconnected parts of the system itself operate in what we call an environment. Okay, so if you take the systems that we saw here previously, okay, even though there's just a remnant of those names, right? Let's take the nervous system, for example. The nervous system, the environment that it exists in is basically the body, right? It's the brain and, of course, the rest of the body. Now, let's take a simpler example in order to understand systems, okay? Basically, let's say you wanted to make a lasagna, or let's say you wanted to make your favorite dish. Your inputs to that dish are going to be the ingredients, right? Like, let's say to make a lasagna, okay, I have no clue what you put to make a lasagna. Okay, let's say you wanted to make a sandwich, okay? Now, the inputs to a sandwich are probably going to be some tomatoes, cucumbers, and then you have bread, and then cheese, and then probably a bunch more stuff, okay? Great. Now, those inputs are going to then be, acted upon by a bunch of processes. Now, those processes are probably going to be you taking the bread, putting it out onto a plate, then you spreading on the mayonnaise or the cheese or whatever, putting on the cheese, and then putting on the tomatoes, and then the cucumber and the lettuce, and whatever else, onions, whatever you want to, okay? And then you slapping the second slice of bread on top of all of those toppings in order to complete the sandwich, okay? Now that is a process, the process of you basically making the sandwich itself, okay? And the output of that is going to be a finished sandwich, okay? Then what's going to happen is that you're going to eat the sandwich and that you're going to get feedback from it. You're going to get feedback from eating the sandwich, which is either going to be good or bad. So let's say, for example, that you used mayonnaise that was a bit too stale or a bit too old, and so it made the sandwich taste extremely terrible. And so what happens is that you then take this feedback and then you push it back into the inputs. So the next time you don't use rotten mayonnaise when you're making the sandwich, okay? And then you repeat the same process over. So you perform the same processes and then you get a different output, okay? And that output you test, you get feedback, okay? This is much better. Let's make it even more better by maybe adding a little bit of salt. And then this process keeps going on and on until you have your desired result, which is a really good tasting sandwich, right? Great. Now, all of this takes place in an environment which is probably going to be your kitchen, okay? Probably going to be your kitchen or your countertop. That's it. Now, that is an example of how a system works. Now, where I'm going with this is basically an idea in systems theory called GIGO, which basically means garbage in, garbage out, okay? Here. Now, let's say you were making a sandwich, but then for whatever reason, you did not have really expensive ingredients, or you basically had some really cheap, shitty ingredients, right? So let's say the tomatoes were really old and then they were basically rotting, but for whatever reason, you decided to use them. The bread had mold on it. The onions, they seem to be hidden away in a storage locker room without any air, without basically anything for months, okay? Basically the worst possible ingredients you can find. You take those, and then you perform the same processes that you did on a good sandwich, okay? You get the output of this shitty sandwich, and then you taste it, and then what happens is, of course, you're not shocked, right? You're going to get a bad sandwich because you put in bad ingredients. So basically, what GIGO aims to inform you, okay, what GIGO in systems theory aims to actually tell you is that if you put garbage into a system, you're going to get garbage out of a system. You can also think of it in terms of the information that you feed your brain, okay? Let's say that you're just watching brain rot content on TikTok. Trust me, I did not know what brain rot was until probably a couple months ago. Yes, that is how dedicated I am to making Hyprland much easier to rise for you. I don't even go on the internet in order to watch brain rot, okay? Yes. Oh, you're not going to find anybody else like me who is this dedicated to help you out. But anyway, that is a different point, okay? Let's say you're just consuming brain rot content on TikTok and then YouTube Shorts, Italian brain rot, whatever it is. Okay, now the processes that are going to happen in your brain is basically your brain assimilating all of that content and then remembering it so that you can spew it out on any person that you meet. Okay, and the outputs of that is basically you being an absolute retard and then not being able to do anything with that information. And then the feedback is that the entire world tells you that you're a retard, and then there is absolutely nothing good that you're doing with your life. Okay. Now that is an example of feeding your brain garbage information and then you experiencing a garbage life because of that. Now let's flip it and then let's say that, for example, you actually fed your brain good information. So you started reading lots of books. Perhaps you picked up something like Marcus Aurelius's Meditations or some other Stoic philosophy book, okay? And then the same processes in your brain happened, which were processes that were basically solidifying the information that you read into your brain, okay? The outputs of that was that you basically started caring about other people and what they thought of you less, as in you basically stopped caring about what other people thought of you as much, okay? And then you started perhaps believing in God a little bit more, okay? That might have been a result, might have been an output. The result of that, the feedback, is that you're living a better life, okay? A life where you're not disturbed by the modern world so much, okay? And that feedback tends to also manifest as others having increased faith in you. That's it. That is an example of GIGO. Now, how does that actually tie into analyzing the best? Because what I did is just to explain one side concept, I went into quite a bit of a tangent. But this is important for you to understand. Nobody else, trust me, on this YouTube space even knows what GIGO is, okay, along with systems theory and analyzing the best and whatnot, let alone explaining it in such a way that even a 5-year-old could understand, okay? You're not a 5-year-old, and I'm pretty sure you understood. If you didn't understand, please go back, rewind and watch it, okay? But anyway, yes. How does that tie into analyzing the best? Well, you can think of your brain as the same way. Like this, you can use the same example that I gave you about the brain rot thing and about the reading good books thing. So you want to analyze the best rices. So what happens when you analyze the best rices as inputs, the way that you can do this is actually go onto reddit.com/r/unixpawn. So you go onto here and then you look at the top posts. So you click on this button over here and then you sort by top. Okay. Now, once you sort by top, you can either sort by today or you can sort by all time. Depends on just how much of an OG setup that you want to create or how much of a newer but still good setup that you want to create. Okay. Now, let's say, for example, that you've already probably watched this video on Quickshell before, but let's say that you were watching this kind of video and then you're taking inspiration from it. Maybe something related to the control center or this vertical bar over here, and then you're applying it to your own machine. Okay, let's take Quickshell as an example. Otherwise, apart from that, let's see, like this one. This one's really good. Generally, awesome rices on Unix Pawn tend to be extremely good. Okay, so you can just look up awesome over here, awesome WM. People don't actually use awesome that much anymore. At least I don't know anybody who actually does, right? But regardless, you can look at awesome WM rices and they look pretty awesome. Now, this is an example, like looking through these rices, which have been upvoted a lot and which like objectively look much cleaner, is a good way to analyze the best and to put quality information and inputs into the system, which is your brain. Okay. Now, when you put quality inputs over here, what happens is that the same processes that your brain usually performs in order to remember stuff and in order to come up with new stuff happens. And the output of that is basically going to be quality setups. So you actually make design choices and design decisions which align with popular design philosophies, like, for example, Material Design 3 or Apple's Liquid Glass or maybe Microsoft's Fluent Design, to name a few, right? You actually create something that is coherent, that is basically one thing, okay? That's not a bunch of different themes Frankenstein together. You're actually creating something that's, unified, okay? And something that's actually pleasing to look at if you make the inputs good, which is why it is important to analyze the best, okay? Now, that's one reason. Now, that is not the only reason why you should bother analyzing the best, because there is another one. It's because of the way that your subconscious brain works, okay? Now, you can think of the creative process as a 3-step process, okay? First, you load up on information, okay? So step 1 in the creative process is loading up on information. Then step 2 in the creative process is stepping away from the information. So you just step away, okay? And then step 3 in the creative process is going to be capturing the output, okay? So what you're going to do, if you were to practically apply this principle when you're actually writing Hyprland, in order to make setups that, of course, look absolutely beautiful and stunning, like this theme switcher over here, along with the rest of the setup. How funny. You know what? How hilarious. Just when I want to show you how this thing actually works, it bugs out. But anyway, that's not what it's supposed to look like, but you get the idea. This is what the theme switcher looks like. It looks pretty damn good. Okay, so let me just come back here. Great. So first thing you're going to do is load up on information, which is going to be quality rices on r/Unix spawn. Okay, you sort by top all time or top in the last month or the last year. Generally, you want to look for awesome WM rices, but then you're not going to find them in the last year because people don't use it as often anymore. Okay, so chances are you're probably going to find Hyprland rices and you're going to use those instead. Great. So first thing is basically loading up on good information. Second thing you're going to do is step away. Stepping away is extremely important because all the absorption of information, okay, is done by the conscious brain. So your brain is divided into 2 parts, okay? Consider this as your brain. Your brain is divided into 2 parts. You have the conscious and the subconscious. Now, below the subconscious, there is the unconscious, but then we don't have to go into that right now, okay? So as far as we're concerned, we have the conscious and then we have the subconscious. So as you're loading up on the information, you're using your conscious brain, okay, in order to filter through all the information, see what's good and see what's bad. Now, when you're stepping away, what you're doing is you're allowing your subconscious brain, which works 24/7, in order to actually assimilate all of that information. Assimilate basically means take all the information, tie it all together, and make it one. Basically make it coherent and make it conducive to your usage of it, okay? That is what you're doing when you're stepping away, which is why you see so many creative people. What they do is they have really intense focus periods where they're so locked in, like you cannot disturb them at all, right? They're really locked in. They're focusing on their craft. They're honing away. They're just chipping away at the rock. They're doing what they have to, okay? And then what they do is they just step away. So they either take a nap or they take a shower or they go for a walk, something in order to just turn their brain off, basically. And then what happens is suddenly thoughts and ideas start coming out of nowhere. Okay? And what you're supposed to do at that stage is capture those thoughts, because thoughts and ideas are as fleeting as anything, right? They're as fleeting as things can possibly get. And so if you want to actually capture them and make use of this loading session over here, what you want to do is capture them in perhaps an idea book or a notebook, right? So you just want to write it down somewhere, anywhere, even on your notes app. That should work. That is okay, great. Now that is summarizing principle 1, which is analyzing the best. Great. Now I have taught you GIGO, which is garbage in, garbage out, system theory, and how a system actually works, along with the creative process and how to actually be creative. Load up on information, step away from the information for some time, wait for the ideas to kick in, and don't judge the ideas. I should have told you this before, but whenever ideas start flowing, you do not want to judge the ideas. Because what happens is when you start getting the conscious brain involved in judging the ideas that the unconscious brain is, spitting out, okay? What happens is that when you start judging the ideas again, the unconscious brain just says, you know what, I am not going to do this anymore because you're not being kind to me, and so I'm just going to stop. And then it's not going to give you any ideas anymore, which is not what you want, right? So don't judge this process. Don't judge the process, okay? Don't judge the ideas that the subconscious brain first gives you, okay? If you want to call it not necessarily bad, but then not exactly what you want, just call it suboptimal. Suboptimal removes a lot of emotion from the word bad, okay? From probably how many ever years, 30 years or 25 years of conditioning, right? Of the word bad, you don't want that. So just use the word suboptimal whenever you get an idea for a setup that you don't like. Okay, great. Now that is basically principle 1, which is analyzing the best. Okay, great. Next up, we have KISS. So keep it simple, stupid. Keep it simple, stupid, right? Now, what is that all about? Well, the core idea is basically to not overcomplicate things. That's it. It doesn't get any simpler than that. We have quite a bit of a backstory when it comes to this principle because it goes way back. This principle was actually used a lot in terms of Arch Linux's design and how it was actually created, I'm pretty sure, along with, how it was actually created. So if you want to know more about that story, you can go ahead and look it up. And of course, oh yeah, I didn't mention this earlier, but if you want to know how to make a theme switcher like this one without having to waste time and basically learn more principles just like these, right? Learn more principles like these, learn more about concepts like systems, and then GIGO, and then the creative process, and a hell of a lot more. Okay, a hell of a lot more tools that I use in order to create amazing, literally jaw-dropping setups like these. Go ahead and click the first link in the description. I show you exactly how to do this, how to think this way, step by step, and of course, teaching you how to actually make a setup like this on your own. Now, if I'm being completely honest, the actual value of the program is not in me teaching you how to do this, but it's in me teaching you how to see and how to think. Because trust me, getting 4 years of experience in probably a day or two it's mad. It's genuinely mental. It's amazing what the internet and what videos can actually allow in order for, fun things to happen. So if you want my paradigm of over 4 years of rising Hyprland, and of course, learning how to make something like this, then go ahead and click the first link in the description. Now, if you're not willing to put in the work, and if you're not willing to invest in yourself, and if you're not willing to just listen to what I have to say, despite me having so much experience, then honestly, the program is not for you. So I don't want you on as a customer. So please do not buy. But if, however, you fit exactly the kind of person, as I mentioned earlier, and you want to know how to make something like this, and you're interested in all of these topics, right? The creative process and GIGO and how that leads into rising Hyprland, go ahead, click the first link in the description. I will be happy and honored to teach you how this stuff actually works. Okay, great. Now, coming back to KISS, pretty simple, right? Just keep it simple, stupid, don't overcomplicate it too much. An example that I could give you for this one is basically in the theme switcher. So how this theme switcher actually works is by using symlinks. Okay, so I won't get into it right now, but then it's basically by using symlinks. There are a bunch of different ways that you can actually implement this theme switcher, okay? But the simplest way is to use something called symlinks, which are basically shortcuts. So if you've ever used Windows, you see that little shortcut on your desktop over there. When you double click on that, an app opens up. Maybe it's Google Chrome, which is your browser, or it's your recycle bin, whatever it is. It's a shortcut. It's not the actual executable itself, but then it is a shortcut to the executable. Same way, that is a symlink. It's a symbolic link, if you will. Okay. So I use symlinks in order to make the theme switcher work. There are a bunch of different ways that you can do it, but using symlinks is the simplest way in order to do it. And so that is me keeping things simple, stupid. Okay. Great. Now, again, that's pretty much it, right? The core idea is that programs, RICEs, and whatnot, they work best when they're simple and then they don't have too many moving parts. Now, moving parts, where does that come in? Again, you have systems. You can basically tie in systems to basically everything in Rising, right? Because Rising itself is a system. And you using a computer itself is a system. Everything, almost everything that you can possibly think of can be systematized. So yes, if you get to know systems theory and systems thinking, which is actually applied systems theory, then trust me, you are going to be unbeatable. Not only in terms of your work and in terms of your daily life and in terms of your intellect, but in terms of rising and creating an environment which looks just absolutely jaw-droppingly stunning. Like, I cannot find enough adjectives to describe how much I love this thing. Like, this is my creation and it's awesome, right? But that's that. You know what? For the second one, I'm just going to keep it simple, stupid, and then not go too in-depth about it. You know what I mean, right? That's that. Then, and finally, the third and the last one is consistent design philosophy. Now, I cannot stress on this enough. I cannot. I see so many RICEs, so many setups on r/unixpon where basically people take an icon pack and then they take a GTK theme that's completely from nowhere, right? Completely random. They take a completely random icon pack, something like Suru Dark plus plus or whatever else icon pack that you have these days. Okay, they combine them, they mash them together, and then they get the worst freaking Ferrari wallpaper that they possibly can. Okay, and then they put that over there, and then they call it a rice. Like, don't do that. Do not do that. You know, if that's you, don't get offended. Just change the way that you do stuff because you want to have consistent design philosophy. Now, besides the reason of it obviously being that it's not going to look as good as if you had consistent design philosophy, right? In the case of not having consistent design philosophy, right? Apart from the obvious reason of why you should have it, There are a couple of other reasons, right? If you don't have it, things end up looking like a mess and spaghetti setups starts to emerge. Okay. Now, as I just mentioned earlier, you get Frankenstein setups where basically you have an arm from a guy who's 6'3" and then you have a foot from a guy who's 5'8". Okay. It's basically all messed up. You do not want your setup to be looking messed up and like Frankenstein. That is not fun. Trust me. I've been there, and while it wasn't as bad as using a random Ferrari wallpaper and then picking one icon pack and then using a completely different GTK theme, okay? While it wasn't that bad, when I first started making rices, yes, it nowhere near looked as good as this one in terms of the themes and the colors and whatnot. Regardless, what you aim to do, or what you should aim to do, is basically keep things consistent. So you have a couple of different design frameworks, right? You have a couple of different options for what design philosophy you could follow, right? So if you really like Apple, right? If you like Apple and the way Apple does stuff, then you, of course, you have their liquid glass. If you've seen iOS 26, then you'll know what I'm talking about. If you have an iPhone, you'll know what I'm talking about. Liquid glass just looks absolutely beautiful. And anybody who disagrees, I'm inclined to call them as people who don't have taste, but then I get it about the accessibility thing, right? But regardless, liquid glass looks pretty damn cool, especially the refractive stuff that you see when you pull down the notification center. Okay, now that is for Apple stuff. And then apart from that, we have Android with its material design. Okay, with Material 3 Expressive. We have Android with Material 3 Expressive. Okay, now if you want to check out what Material 3 is actually, right, just go to m3.material.io. And this is Material Design 3's website. So here they describe the entire set of basically rules that you're supposed to follow in order to make material design products. So this, like for example, this is what a material design app looks like. This is the sidebar for an M3 app. And here we have M3 Expressive, which is designing with emotion. So you have lots of motion physics, and then you have lots of more, what do you call it? Animations and transitions and stuff. Ta-da. Right, so you can use Material Design 3, you can use Apple's Liquid Glass as inspiration, or you can also use Windows, right? You can also use Windows's thing, Windows's, design language, which is called Fluent. Now, it's actually not half bad, contrary to what most people say, okay? Apart from the control panel being light mode and then a bunch of other catastrophes that are, constantly happening in Windows, their modern Windows 11 design philosophy is not actually half bad. So if you wanted to mimic that, you can use Windows's Fluent design. So here I've given you 3 examples as to different design philosophies that you could try and model off of. Okay, the one that's easiest to model, in my opinion, is going to be Android with Material 3 Expressive, because End4 has already done it. Okay, so you can take that as inspiration. Or otherwise, you most likely have an Android phone, and it's most likely running Android 14 or later, which means that you can draw a lot of inspiration from that and then design your setups based off of that. Now for this one, I actually used some material design principles, even though it might not seem like it, right? But regardless, this is the kind of setup that you can learn to make whenever you learn how to actually fully apply these principles properly to get you setups like these, right? And that's that. Now, we have a couple of other reasons. Right, we have 2 more reasons actually, and another one is that it's basically more maintainable because you have a consistent design philosophy. Things are not going anywhere. That you have one constant, okay? And so it makes it really easy to iterate stuff. Let's say that you have let's say you are changing Rafi themes, okay? Let's say you have one particular Rafi theme, but then because you have the rest of the system following a consistent UI design, it's very easy to iterate this Rafi theme, keep it in line with the rest of the system. Okay, which wouldn't be the case if you had Frankenstein spaghetti going on everywhere. Okay, so which is another reason why you should have consistent design. And yeah, as I just mentioned, you can create more themes and then iterate them easier. That's it. Now, as a bonus, because you deserve the best, as a bonus, I'm going to give you one more principle, and that is going to be creative. Be creative. Let me just, yes, be creative. Now, why? It's because there is a lot that you can do with it, especially using these 2 core ideas that I introduced earlier. Like, even if you tossed out these other principles, just analyzing the best is going to give you the best results in terms of rising Hyprland to be the best, right? All you need to understand is GIGO, the basics of how a system works, okay? And the creative process. So if you understand this, you should be able to create the best Hyprland setups ever. Like, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter where you come from. It doesn't matter how much experience you've had with Hyprland, okay? With enough iteration, which basically means repeating the same thing, or repeating the same thing, but then with different changes every single time, right? Iteration with lots of iterations, you're going to get a setup that eventually looks as good as this, or maybe even better. The better thing is probably not likely, but regardless, you can get a setup that looks pretty damn good. Okay? And that is why I'm asking you to be creative. So don't just take an icon pack, that one that you found on gnome-look.org. Just go over there, find a GTK theme, and then slap that on over here, blah, 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 blah. Hey, look, I have a new GTK theme. No. Don't be a retard. Don't be stupid. Be creative. Do something of your own. Take inspiration from the best, of course, okay? Or otherwise, just innovate. Try and look at things that you would never look at in terms of design inspiration. Like, for example, Tesla. Let's say you have a Tesla, okay? And then you see the control center, you see the control panel. You think, that actually looks pretty cool. Let me model that instead. And then you do that. Ta-da! You're going to pretty much be the first and probably the only person in the history of the universe to have raised Hyprland or raised your setup based on Tesla's design philosophy. Think about it. That is why you have to be creative, right? And that's pretty much it. Remember this. Remember GIGO. Remember this stuff about the creative process. Remember the subconscious mind. Remember these design principles, and you should be good to go. If you want to know how to make a blazing fast and beautiful setup like this one, as I just showed you, right, complete with the theme switcher and this Overwatch panel, along with all of the other goodies like this brightness switcher and this app launcher, along with everything else, right, just completely taught to you without you having to look for everything online everywhere all at the same time, right? If you like saving your time and you don't like looking for stuff, you don't like being a squirrel, right, just looking for information, trying to save it all the time. Oh no, I gotta save information. If that's not you, right, if you are actually a sane person who likes to save their time and spend it on doing useful, productive stuff, spending it with care, right, go ahead and click the first link in the description. And of course, if that's not you, then I don't even know how you're watching this video so far. I commend you. But anyway, that's that. If you liked the video, hit like. If you loved it and want to see more like this in your feed, hit subscribe, and I will see you next time. Stay rising.